So welcome. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. I'm going to go ahead and jump in to prioritizing your health and setting up some healthy habits, getting rid of lazy habits. We're going to be going over today what are your habits, why you might have them, good or bad, and how you can use that information to literally start changing your habits and being successful in creating the goals and making them into a reality. So before I dive into the nitty-gritty of habits, I want you to take a moment, stop and think of who it is you're wanting to become. And what does that look like? Like when you sit down and you think of yourself as successful, you've achieved everything you want, the feelings that you want, the daily life that you want, what does that look like? Like, what is that identity for yourself? So just think about that for a moment. All right, so as I talk today, keep that person in the forefront of your mind because everything I'm going to say is going to relate to that person and that identity that you can become. It's just a matter of time. So that person in your brain isn't any different than the person now. It's literally just time and retraining your brain and habit formation process, which we're going to break down. Because most people will fail because they don't understand the structure of habits. And I'm going to use the word habits today. You slightly interchange them with the word goals. Habits are much more appropriate. Goals you can fail, habits you can build. There's 3 important things we're going to cover. The first is how to change your outcomes, how to change your process, and then third, and the deepest layer, is how to change your identity. And that is the most important. So like, how do you change who you are to be that person that you envision? There's a few myths that I want to bring to light. And the first one is that lack of willpower is not to blame. So I don't know about you, but there's been so many times where it's like, oh, my willpower, my motivation, where is this self-control? It's disappeared. Motivation, willpower, those things are completely finicky, right? Some days they're here, some days they're gone. And when we're talking about success, we don't want to rely on anything inconsistent. Like, I don't know about you, but I want results, I want wins, I want consistency. So good news, lack of willpower is not to blame. People who are successful are really just working off a base of habitual patterns. So things like making their kids lunches, paying the bills on time, getting to the gym, all those things are habitual patterns that they've trained their brain to do without thinking. They're not sitting over there being like, oh, I'm really exercising my self-control, I've got strong willpower. They've created habits, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Second myth I want to bring up is that apps really can't change you. So if you're spending a lot of time on your phone using apps to track things, it's focusing on the wrong material. Apps generally are tracking and recording behavior, and research has shown that just tracking and recording doesn't lead to behavior change. So if you're focusing our time on apps, it's really irrelevant. I would stop focusing on that and start working on kind of the habit change I'll be talking about today. And then third myth and final myth I want to bring up is that there's a magic number for making habits form or for making your goals achievable. You might have heard like, okay, in 2 months, if you do this daily, it'll now become a habit. Or in 6 months, things like that. There is no magic number. So in different studies that have been done, some people might form a habit in 18 days. Some it might take a whole year. And that's going to be completely dependent on you as a person, but then also on the habit you're trying to form. In some of the studies that have been done, they did find that there's like an average number of 66 days, so roughly 2.5 months, but it completely depends on the habit you're trying to create. So more importantly than a magic number, I want you to focus on the fact that habits are a slow process created by repeat behaviors and stability. So more than a number, we're going to focus on establishing a routine on the same day, at the same time, same place. So what this means is you're creating automatic action that requires less thought and less willpower, and you're creating triggers and literally training your brain to do things without thinking. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. A big way to do that is to change your environment. So for example, if you see, I imagine you've experienced this. If you see a plate of cookies on the counter, it's much more likely you're going to eat a cookie than if the cookies are in a sealed container in the cupboard, right? So your environment, your home, your office, everything in your life will help you determine whether you can have those routines, whether they're good or they're bad. So changing your behavior is just as important as establishing that routine. Not nearly as important as apps, not nearly as important as a timeline or a deadline. In different studies, it's been found that if you do things like put lids on candy dishes, people are less likely to eat candy. If you have junk food at the back of the store aisle, people are less likely to buy junk food. If you don't have a TV in the living room, you're less likely to watch TV, right? Like common sense things, but people are often more willing to set goals than they are to do something like remove the TV from their living room. So, moving on. Habits are formed through doing, not through having a resolution. So if you are sitting there thinking, okay, I'm going to think about how I want to change and I'm going to kind of educate myself, great, but there's not going to be a habitual change until you actually just do the new behavior and start to go through the process of training your brain. We'll talk about how you do that. First of all, you need to know how habits work. There are 4 things that go into habit formation process. You've got a cue and a trigger, you've got a craving, you've got an action, and you've got a reward. The cue or trigger is part of the habit loop where you're triggered to take some type of action, whether it's from your internal environment or external environment. The action might be good or bad, but it's the part where you actually take the action that you either want to adopt or that you want to drop. And then the reward is the reward that your brain gets for either taking or not taking the action. So for example, your phone buzzes. You have a craving to know what the text message says. So the action, you grab your phone and you read the text. And you've automatically satisfied your craving of knowing what the text says, and you now have a new habit formed. Phone buzzes, grab phone. Another example might be you're leaving work, you're walking down the street by work, and you smell donuts. You crave a donut. So you go and you buy a donut and you eat it. You get the craving satisfied because you got to eat a donut, but you've also formed a habit. When you walk down your street by work, you have a craving for a donut, whether you actually smell the donut or not, right? And so you can have habit loops that are starting to be created every day by every choice that you make and by how your environment is surrounding you. Important to note that the bad habits, or the habits that most people want to drop, have immediate rewards built into them, like alcohol, drugs, junk food. We get an immediate response of reward when consuming those types of things. But things like meditation or exercise or eating healthy, the reward comes much, much later. And so as I'm working with clients and as I'm talking to you about these things, it's really important that you put in place immediate rewards for healthy habits as well. And that might look like a bite of dark chocolate for the first 3 months after every workout. Something little, and at some point you're not going to need it because the long-term rewards start to kick in. All right, so how do you make habits attainable? How do you, when you think back to this person that you want to envision or that you envision that you want to become, how do you set in place stepping stones to become that person? First and foremost, you can't set giant goals. So It's been so many times where I've heard people say things like, I haven't worked out in years, but I've decided I'm going to become a bodybuilder and I'm going to train for 2 hours every day. Or something like, right now I'm just eating so much fast food. I tend to go after work every single day and eat fast food, but I decided that now I'm going to eat only salad every single day and never eat junk food again. Great, that might last for a week or 2 weeks, but generally people fail because such big changes are not attainable and not sustainable. So when you think back to this vision of yourself, it's crucial that you make the stepping stones to that person so small that you can't fail. If you want to become stronger, you do 1 push-up a day. If you want to become smarter, you read 1 page in a book per day. If you want to build a business, you spend 1 minute per day just prospecting about your business. The key is making habits stick. So when we talked about this habit loop, the craving, the trigger, the reward, you have to start slow and start to train your brain to stick to whatever habit you're giving it. So for example, the person walking down the street, they smell the donut, they can keep following through with that and make that a habit, or they can change their pattern and make it something different. And the key to that is making these habits you want to build so small that you cannot fail. Eventually, these really, really small habits build to much bigger achievements. And this is through compounding your habits. So common sense, right? It might be that you do the 1 push-up per day, and then the next day you do 2 and 2 and 2, and then the next day you do 3 and 3 and 3, right? Makes sense. You kind of build upon it. But also, if you have a habit or a goal of doing 100 push-ups per day, and you go, I'm just going to go do 100 push-ups, you might stop at like 60, and then your shoulder hurts, right? But if you do 10 push-ups 10 times throughout your day, you'll probably achieve your goal. So how can you take your bigger goals, break them down into small pieces that you cannot say no to and you cannot fail? Then secondly, to ensure success, you can never miss a habit twice. And again, we're going back to like, how do you train your brain to follow through on these things? Rule of thumb, you can never miss a habit twice. You will definitely slip up. You are definitely going to have times where you miss your habits. That's human nature. And research luckily has shown that if you slip up, it won't impact the brain training of behavior pattern training. But if you have a cumulative effect of missing your habits, then you will have poor consequences and it will mess up the effect. So it's really important to remember that there's a difference between going through a dip and a difference between hitting a dead end. No dead ends in here. Like, I don't believe in dead ends. If you see a dead end, turn around, walk back, get back in the dip, start again. Never miss the habit twice. So then this goes back to that time frame, right? Like, you have to remember that it's a slow process. It might take you 50 days to form your new habit. It might take you 500 days to form your new habit. Doesn't really matter to get to day 50 or to get to day 500. You have to start with day 1. All right, so what are some action steps that you can take? What are some strategies that you can start implementing now to make action steps and to make goals reality? So first, before I get into some of these action steps, I want you to think back to that person you envision. And what, if you could think of like one goal that you really have for that person or for yourself to become that person, like what does that look like? And then based on what you've heard already on kind of making things more attainable, starting to use this habit loop to your advantage, how can you start to break down that goal a little bit into smaller pieces that can become daily patterns? So those big goals are really just an accumulation of daily habits. Like what we do in a day determines who we become and who we are and what we achieve. So when we talk about daily habits, we're talking about big successes at the same time. When you think about that goal you have, that person you want to become, how can that look like? What can that look like on a daily level? All right, so now you maybe have some like ideas buzzing around your brain. Let's put those into action steps. First things first, you've got to become a scheduler. For those of you who don't like scheduling things, I'm sorry, you have got to cross to our side. It is worth it. So there are two ways to schedule things. First one is to put it in your calendar. That's kind of obvious. I'll come back to that in a second. The second way is to tie it to a current behavior. So let's say you have a goal of becoming stronger, becoming more toned. Maybe you want to do a certain like PR. Maybe you want to do certain amount of pull-ups. And so you're thinking, okay, well, in my daily life, you know, I can start with doing like 3, maybe 5 times a day, something like that. Okay, yes, you can schedule it in your calendar, which we'll talk about, but you can also tie it to a current behavior. Example, you want to wear sunscreen every day. Every time you leave the house in the morning, you put on sunscreen. So you create a cue and a trigger like we talked about, that when you go through your front door, it triggers you to remember sunscreen. Put the sunscreen by the front door so it's visible, but you're creating a habit loop tied to a current behavior. Or for example, flossing. Don't have your floss in a drawer. Put your floss right by your toothbrush so that when you pick up your toothbrush, you see the floss and you have the trigger of holding the toothbrush is the reminder to also floss. Same thing with the pull-ups. You might have a trigger that every time you eat a meal, you're triggered to do 3 pull-ups prior to your meal. So you're starting to tie it to a behavior. Same trigger, same sequence every time. So small that you cannot fail, and you can only miss 1, never miss 2. And then putting it in your calendar is self-explanatory. Say you're writing a book and you want to get back on track with your writing schedule, 9 a.m. Monday morning, button seat, you're doing it. You want to exercise, you want to get back into a really stable exercise routine. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 6 p.m. at the gym, I'll see you there, we're doing it. But let's say there's moments where you can't feasibly make these things happen. Like life comes up, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 6 p.m. Kid has a birthday party, so-and-so, you have to drive to the airport, like whatever, these things happen, right? How do you not miss twice then when we have crazy lives? The thing is, you have to stick to your schedule no matter what. But if 6 p.m. Wednesday rolls around and you're driving so-and-so to the airport, you can't go to the gym, but you know what you can do? You can do 1 squat. And you might not get a full body workout, but you've started to create that brain training. And this is really what is crucial, is that you're starting to put triggers, cues, and then follow through with a habit so that no matter what, there's automatic response and you're starting to do it regardless. Another example might be, I use the example again of writing. Let's say you're writing a book or you're writing an article. You don't have enough time to write a full article. At 9 a.m. Monday morning when you have it scheduled, write 1 paragraph. You have time to write 1 paragraph. You have time to do 1 squat. Let's say you really have a goal to do more yoga, to do more meditation. One day rolls around when you have it scheduled and you don't have enough time, you can take 10 seconds to breathe. Everyone has 10 seconds to breathe. So really kind of absorb this information that it's not always about doing like the full out performance. It's about training your brain to follow through on these cues and these triggers, or to follow through on these schedules that you've given yourself until it becomes automatic behavior, until this becomes your identity, and then you're literally living that vision you have of yourself. All right, so it might seem like small things like doing a squat or writing a paragraph are pretty insignificant, but again, this is like about sticking to your schedule and training your brain no matter what for long-term success. I think often too, we focus on what is withheld from us. Like, oh, I don't have time to write that whole article. I don't have time to go to the gym today. I don't have time to cook foods and put them in the freezer so I have 10 meals for this week. Like, all right. But you do have so much. You have the opportunity to do so much. You might think, I don't have enough education. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. I don't have the right contacts for building a business. I don't have the right experience. I need to learn more. I don't know what to do. I feel uncomfortable. I feel stupid. These are all things that I hear people say. What I want you to think instead is, I can work with this. Because you can. There's like hardly any situation where a person can't work with what they have. So if there's a moment where you're like, oh my God, I can't get to the gym, or oh my God, I just, can't make that smoothie this morning that I really have been wanting to make, like, okay, but you can work with this. You can drink a glass of water instead. You can do one squat, and you're still following through. And follow through is more important than not doing the full thing. Making sense? It really comes down to also knowing your identity. So, how do I want to explain this? So when you know your identity, you are already kind of living that person you want to become. So it's important when you think of these habits, you think of these goals that you want to form, that you decide the type of person you want to be, and you prove it to yourself with small wins. So you've decided you want to be that person who's strong, and you prove it to yourself by doing that one pull-up each day. That will create way more success than doing 15 pull-ups once a day for 3 days. Doing one pull-up 5 times a week for the next year will prove to you that you are a person, you're the type of person that you really want to be. So when you're thinking of identity, here's some examples. Maybe you have a goal to lose weight. Then have the identity of a person who moves every day. You don't have to think of losing weight as something in the future. You can change your identity now to be, I'm someone who moves every day. And the point is not the goal. The point is that you're somebody who walks for 10 minutes every day, and eventually you'll reach your goal, but it really doesn't matter the how or when. You're a mover. Let's say you want to become a better writer. Then you need to become the type of person who writes 1,000 words every day. You might write 1 paragraph each day, and that's it. But now you've become a writer. It's not like you had to write that book already. You want to become strong? Be the type of person who never misses a workout. And that workout might be 3 push-ups Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and that's it. But as we talked about building on goals, that starts to build. And again, this is about like training your brain that you are that person, and you will take off as soon as you start to have that success and those wins and start to already embody that identity. This is really about making slow progress and not making perfection. So you need to shift your focus from what is withheld to you and instead say, I can work with this, and use what is available to you. Are you curious enough to go to the gym even if you look stupid? Great. Are you willing to be vulnerable and put your skin in the game and start your own business? Do it. Are you eager enough to improve your work that you'll battle through the frustration of making something mediocre, right? These like being willing to just kind of go for these small changes create big life changes. Whether it's good or bad, best or worst, you've got to be willing to start. And also, just because it's not optimal, I've kind of been talking about like this optimal thing, doesn't mean it's not beneficial. All of clients will be like, oh, I want to go paleo, but every Friday I get together with my friend and we always have dairy, so I guess I can't do that. Well, no, go paleo 1 day of the week, eat cheese the rest. It's better than 0. Or another thing I hear is something like, I want to eat better, but on these days, we always have pizza night, or we always have ice cream Sunday morning with the kids, so I just can't do that. It's better if you start with one day at a time. You will definitely succeed than trying to make all big changes at once. 90% of your results are going to hinge on sticking to the basics. And that last 10% is really the optimal things of like the bigger picture. But the basics are just the fundamentals. It's like just doing what you said you're going to do in those small ways. And then we talked a little bit already about designing your environment for success. So literally, when you think about that person you want to be, after this workshop, I want you to walk around your house and be like, how can I change my environment up for success? How can I change up my kitchen so that I see what I want and I get a trigger? What can I take away so I'm not triggered to do the things I don't want to do? And also, I encourage you for the next few days to notice what pre-existing habit loops you might already have going. Like when your phone buzzes, do you automatically reach for it? When you get home, do you automatically click on the TV because it's the thing in your living room, not because it's actually what you care about? Okay, let's get out of that. Great. And then we're almost to the end of some of these action steps. It's really important that you care about what you're choosing to do. So many times I'll have people create these goals and these habits that they just don't really care about. If you are having so much trouble trying to stick to your habits, it's probably not important to you. And that's okay. Like, let it go. Find something that is important to you, and I promise you, you will find a way to stick to it. And this isn't about living life to standards that somebody else thinks are right. This is about becoming the person you want to become, because that is what is important to you, and you will follow through on those things. Your life today, I already mentioned this, but how you live today is really just a sum of your habits. How in shape or out of shape are you? It's a result of your habits. How happy or unhappy are you? It's a result of your habits. How successful or unsuccessful are you? It's a result of your habits. What you repeatedly do, what you spend time thinking about and doing, forms the person you are. It forms the things you believe, and it also forms the personality that you portray. So changing your daily tiny habits literally changes like your ultimate life and long-term success. Okay, so kind of in a synopsis of what we've talked about today. So your environment that you live in can either make it easier or harder for you to practice habits, whether they are unhealthy or healthy habits. So if you have bad habits now, it's probably because of your environment. And you can make it much more difficult to practice those for yourself. You can also make it easier to practice healthy habits and to stick to new behaviors if you change up your environment. Make something visible so you have a visible trigger. Put it in a location where you won't forget about it, and make yourself have to opt out of doing it. It's much harder to opt out of something that's sitting right in front of you. Like if you want to take more vitamins, put them on the counter where you will see them every morning. A couple more examples would be like if you sleep with your phone next to your bed, then checking your social media and email as soon as you wake up is going to be a default. So if you don't want to do that anymore, don't sleep with your phone next to your bed. If you walk into your living room and all your couches and chairs face the television, then watching television is going to be the default. If you keep alcohol in your kitchen, then drinking it consistently is going to be the default. Defaults can also be positive. If you keep a dumbbell weight next to your desk, then pumping some quick curls is going to be a default. If you have a water bottle with you throughout the day, drinking it will be the default over soda. If you have the floss visible, you're more likely to do it, and on and on and on. So changing your environment, making your habits attainable, understanding the habit loop, and then starting to really look at your bigger picture you and shifting your identity to be that person now. If you're a person who has lost weight, you are a mover today. If you're a person who's written a book, You're a person who writes 1,000 words today. Shifting your identity to become that person right now. So just take a moment and think, what are some cues that you can set up in your environment to remind you to take action? What are some ways that you can limit the barrier to action for my desired habit? So for example, how can you eliminate barriers to becoming the person you want to become? And then how can you reward yourself? We talked about how little rewards are really important components of that habit loop. How can you give yourself little rewards, especially in the beginning process of forming these habits? And then when and where exactly are you going to do this? So some is not a number, some day is not a time. Like this is talking about starting with day one and making a small step and then training your brain no matter what to follow through. I will do that one squat at 6 p.m. on Wednesday because I said I would. Didn't make the gym, that's okay, but I still did something and I'm training my brain. When you do forget, do you have a system in place to automatically remind you the next time? You want to be happier? Every time you stop in your car at a red light, say 2 things you're grateful for. That red light is that reminder that when you forget, next time you see the red light, you're reminded and you can think of those 2 grateful things. Okay, so if you have any questions about everything we talked about super fast, think about these concepts, muse about them, look around your house, start implementing them, and then reach out to me. If you're like, hey, this is my goal, and now I know what you're talking about, and I'm thinking of making these environmental changes, but I'm not quite sure. What do you think? Message me. I would love to hear about what changes or ideas or thoughts these concepts brought into your brain, and how this also might have been different for you than the usual, like, okay, write down 3 goals, and now go achieve those 3 goals. Good luck. You know, thinking about success a little bit differently today. And then also, I am hosting a 6-week brain training course from November 11th through the 16th of December. It's 2 calls a week, similar format to this, plus a whole online curriculum. If that's something you or someone you know could benefit from, I'll be sending out an email about that, and you can be on the lookout for it. Thank you so much for joining me today.